Hello, my name is Anne Corless and I'm an artist and an illustrator. I also work as a designer and I'm a qualified medical artist, which is why I've got a particular interest in creating artwork of animals and especially horses. I'm here today at Christine Worthington's wonderful farm with the lovely Lizzie, who she's very kindly allowed us to come and take pictures of, and Matthew Simpson, who's very kindly doing our videoing today, so that we can put this together to show you how to create artwork of horses and ponies.
Hello, I'm Christine. This is my lovely mare Lizzie. She's an Irish Draft cross thoroughbred, 14 years old. I've had her since she was 6. I'm a student of Pirelli natural horsemanship, and what that has given me is the opportunity to really develop a partnership, and I can do lots of fun things with Lizzie. I'm also an NLP coach, and I work with riders to help them achieve their goals, and usually that means help motivate them and help them with their confidence. I've written a book, in fact, on that very subject, how to become a confident rider. And I know that Anne is also really interested in how to motivate people, how to help them achieve their goals. So if you're watching this and you think that you would like to have a go at painting and drawing a horse, then we hope this will motivate you, and just give it a go.
One of the main things I want to show today is how a piece of artwork starts out. Now, we're very lucky that Lizzie is quite happy with me standing in the menage with her, and it's possible to just do a few quick sketches. And basically all that I'm doing is just looking at proportion, and she's very relaxed, isn't she, which is very nice. I don't worry that it doesn't look exactly right. I just try and get the attitude of the horse. She's very relaxed. And just basically get the shape right. And she is such a superb colour, isn't she? You know, I want to call her black, but then she's got all these lovely shades of brown in her. And that's not, again, not necessarily what I'm looking at right at the moment. And look at her lip, bottom lip, very relaxed. So I think the other thing to say about this, let's just put a bit of a mane and that little white bit here, and I can sort of smudge it a bit. It always looks better when you do a little bit of smudging. But the other thing to say about this is how we start. And it's very easy to lose confidence and think, well, I can't do anything like that. You know, this is how it'll end up. And my work is quite sort of detailed, and it has, you know, many, many layers. This is an oil painting. First time it's ever been in this menage. Doesn't it look nice? Should we keep it here? And it just shows you the difference between the end result, which takes an awful lot of time and work in the studio, and the beginning, which is just identifying shapes, looking for landmarks. As I say, I'm very lucky that Lizzie is quite relaxed and sort of allows me to be here without causing any fuss. So it'll be interesting to hear what Christine thinks about this process and what we're aiming for.
It's just really fascinating how Anne can stand here next to Lizzie with her charcoal and pad and start to get some shapes down. Because to me, you know, this wonderful animal, there's so much going on here. I mean, just looking at her eye, I see so much. And as an artist, Anne will obviously see a lot more. And Lizzie's really good and relaxed, as Anne said, standing there so that she can get some shapes down on paper. But then to see that, take that to the next step, we're going to ask Lizzie to move around this arena. Because I know that Anne can really then look at a lot more, and a lot more of the horse's personality will come through. And then taking that to this sort of end result of a wonderful oil painting, I'm sure you'll agree. It's just amazing.
One of the things that I would like to put across today is really the joy of having a go and sketching. I mean, the trouble is when you do, there's always somebody to watch, isn't there? Which, well, best not to worry about that. But I think it's good to sketch because it gives you the opportunity to really study the horse and the shape. It's great to take photographs, and sometimes that's the only reference you can get. But if you have got the opportunity to just absolutely study, and isn't that a beautiful pose, just so beautiful, then it really helps you to identify the shapes And it might not look like a whole lot when you're doing your sketch, but when you get home and you're putting everything together, there are going to be some marks that you've made which are going to be quite significant. Well, Lizzie's now moving, and the great thing about this is that we can start to really study the muscles and her structure and her attitude. She's looking around at a minute. She's got to get into it a little more in a moment, but there we go. So that's really nice to start to see her move. She moves very nicely over the ground. The colours are fantastic, aren't they? Because, you know, it's a black horse, but there's an awful lot of, if you look at the shoulder, there's quite a bit of brown and red. She's obviously out to grass during the summer, but she's looking really very splendid, and it's nice to see her working with Christine, and, you know, there's a good relationship there, isn't it, which is something, again, that I want to put across, is the intelligence of this horse and the personality. But in terms of doing the actual artwork, what I'm looking for is the right pose. Then we're going to look at tonal values. Not so difficult with this horse, actually, because she's dark anyway. So if you actually, obviously the white spot on the face, the white blaze is white. There's your white point. The darkest point is going to be, let's say, in the shadows, under the legs, a little bit down the neck. And if you sort of imagine that you've got a grade of from 1 to 10 of light to dark with lots of little squares, and I'll show you that when we get back in the studio, then the way that you describe the form of the horse is to put in all these gradations of tonal value, from light to dark. And that's how we describe the shape. And I'll have a little go at that in a minute. As I say, these are just working studies. You don't have to worry too much about proportion and such. It's just getting the idea and then being able to come back from the day and remember what you actually did. Colour, for me, always comes last, really. Once I get the tonal values in, and we've then therefore got the form, it's afterwards that I start to study the actual bits of colour. And as I say, not such an issue with Lizzie because she's quite dark anyway. It's always important when you're painting anything, really, I suppose, is not to have hard edges, because when you actually look at her in front of the background, she's not a cutout in front of it. You know, where she disappears and the background starts, your negative shape, if you like, it's very soft, isn't it? So I think it's quite important. You know, when we do sketch, we tend to do the outline shape. But I think really what we need to do is look at what makes up the whole of the body and how to do that by showing, as I say, the tones and the values such that you're looking at a series of shapes. And of course with horses they're always beautifully rounded and musculature, which is lovely. So now that Lizzie's moving around, we're just trying to get very quick, well, doodles really, just to just keep changing direction, which is always a challenge to the artist. But of course, if you have a few little doodles on the go, you can keep looking at each one and working on each one independently. And as I say, they're not going to be exact studies because you can't really do that. And that's not really the purpose. The purpose of this is me having a really good look at this lovely horse. And when I go back into the studio and I'm looking at a combination of some photographs that I've taken and quick studies, and I'll put it all together and design my final image. And there'll be something about one of these images that I will think, yeah, that works. That works. You know, composition-wise, I mean, obviously we're in the most fantastic setting, but I'm not really going to know what composition it's going to be until I am home and I've got time to quietly work it all out and see what really brings her out the best. It's actually pretty much anything, really. She looks stunning. But I think you know what I mean, that there's going to be something that I'm going to say, yeah, I'd really like to do that. it's very, very nice the way she pays attention to Christine. That's a very nice relationship too. As I say, look at that when she walks right up to her. Isn't that lovely? And maybe that's something I can sort of try and pick out. Perhaps Christine will end up in the painting as well, who knows? I might do a little character study of them both together because it's really very sweet. I think the other thing is I'm standing here in the arena with Matt, and there's an awful lot of horses that I really wouldn't consider doing that. I'm quite happy to do it today because I have met Lizzie before and I know that she's got a good understanding with Christine, and equally I'm right by the gate. Hello Lizzie. So if I felt at all worried, I can assure you I would be straight over it, although that would be quite an achievement. And I think Matt would be ahead of me. But I think you do have to, seriously, you do have to be very careful about the situations you put yourself in to get the correct reference. Because of course, you know, this is not something you could easily do with every single horse. And certainly if you had more than one, you've got more than one to keep an eye on. So that's a little bit more challenging as well for the artist. So I'd say take great care. I think what we've had today, I mean these doodles probably don't look like anything, but this movement is fantastic because it's really showing me the musculature, which is so important. I mean, you don't actually have to know your anatomy inside out, and I often forget what different bits are called, but I have got my book, I can look them up, I can say, yeah, that's actually meant to be there, and different ponies and horses are different in different ways. And these are quite sort of interesting aspects to look at. I could even sit and sort of match up my colours with her coat. That's another quite useful exercise. See these muscles around the leg here are so lovely. Doesn't matter if you end up with a bit of a higgledy-piggledy mess, because hopefully at the end of the day you'll say, that's quite nice, so hopefully it will achieve what it's meant to achieve. Hi everybody, we're back in the studio again now, and this time I'm going to show you a small picture, just to prove I can do small pictures. This is a picture of a little Shetland pony, and actually it's a good one to start with, because all I have had to consider with this, obviously, is the tonal values of light to dark. And I think it's really quite important to look at how you actually make a shape look like a horse. And clearly, it's the light areas which are defining the shape against the darker areas, the mid-tones, and then the very dark, so that you can actually start to see the structure. Dead easy to do with black and white. In a minute we'll look at a big painting and try and work out how the values from light to dark work with that. So now we're looking at a slightly bigger painting. This is called A Tribute to Lancashire Constabulary Mounted Branch. And the reason I painted this rather large 5-foot wide oil painting was to support the Benevolent Fund, which is run by Lancashire Constabulary. And I actually have made prints of this, and part of the proceeds of the prints go to the Benevolent Fund. So I think that's actually two things I wanted to say about doing a painting like this. It's really nice when you're setting out working as an animal artist, which of course, you know, I do all aspects of wildlife and horses and dogs, but it's really nice if you have a reason to paint. And it's not always a commission. Sometimes you do have to put a bit of your own time and effort into doing something which you know is going to do you good as well, because people, if they like it, they're obviously going to want to see more of your work. And you wouldn't necessarily get commissioned to do something like this. I mean, hopefully, you know, it will lead to something. But it's also very nice to be able to get access to models such as this, because of course you're helping them, and that works with lots of different charities. It's a very good way to, I think, for everyone to get something out of the art, which is nice. So painting something like this is quite a challenge. Obviously you've got to get your drawing down first, and I tend to draw with paint, just burnt umber or raw umber, just very lightly to try and get all the shapes in. And then it's a matter of making sure, you know, when we looked at the little pony, it was quite easy to understand the tonal values from light to dark. When you do an underpainting of something like this, the first layer, and you're doing it all in one colour, dead easy. But when you start introducing colour, it gets a little more difficult, because you have to work out what colour, where the colour is within a tonal scale of light to dark. So for instance, you want the contrast to work very well. So for instance, here we have, that's your lightest point, and your darkest point would be, for instance, round here, round here. I mean, that's quite obvious, but there's a whole range of tones or values within the painting to describe the form that are at different levels. And here and there you do have to sneak in little accents of light to really emphasize the form. So although we have a highlight here and down the leg, and we're going round the shape, you can see the shadow coming round, we've also got just a little hint of light here, which against the darkness of the horse and the boot really works quite well. And I think that's really, it's a bit of a puzzle, isn't it? You've just got to work out where your lights and your darks are to enable you to really sort of get that very high contrast. So the last thing to look at in part one of this video is my favourite painting, Escaping the Storm. Actually, the thing about this, which was great fun, is it's really from my imagination. I was inspired seeing this horse galloping in a menage. I thought it was the most beautiful thing ever, and I just imagined what it would be like with the darkness of the storm behind and just careering out, you know, and decided to sort of paint the three together. It's good fun to be able to do things like that, and I would, you know, encourage anyone to use their imagination in their artwork. Well, this is the end of part one. Part two will be seriously looking at how to do the artwork of Lizzie in the studio. So look forward to seeing you in part two.